I'm Trench Reynolds. I write crime. By the end of 2025, one thing was obvious. It wasn't that schools lacked safety systems. It wasn't that officials lacked options. It wasn't even that warnings were ignored. It was that nobody was ever responsible. School shootings continued, security systems failed loudly and often, and accountability, real accountability, never arrived. This is the story of how 2025 became the year school safety stopped being about prevention and became about selling the appearance of control. In 2025, school safety followed a familiar script. Every tragedy was followed by the same question: what are we doing about this? And instead of addressing gun access, lawmakers and districts reached for faster answers. They reached for vendors. They reached for technology. They reached for systems that promised action without consequence. The goal wasn't to stop shootings. The goal was to be seen responding. One of the most visible players in 2025 was OmniAlert. Their pitch was simple: AI-enhanced cameras scanning schools around the clock, identifying firearms before a shot is fired. They promised early detection, human verification, faster police response, and prevention through technology. They even rolled out Safe Havens grants, offering the system for free to districts like the Uvalde, Texas School District. Free, at least at first. But the year made one thing clear: detection doesn't mean accuracy, and speed doesn't mean safety. In Baltimore County, Maryland, OmniAlert didn't just fail once, it failed repeatedly. In October, outside Kenwood High School, a black teenager eating a bag of Doritos was flagged as a possible shooter. Police arrived with guns drawn. The student was handcuffed and searched. He later said he wondered if he was going to die. Weeks later at Parkville High School, the system triggered another police response. Students were relocated, officers swept the building, but again, no weapon. WBAL-TV later confirmed what the district hadn't volunteered. OmniAlert produces false positives every single day. Not occasionally, daily. Only the most explosive incidents ever make the record. When asked what went wrong, officials offered a chilling answer: the system worked as intended. Maryland's Inspector General later explained the Doritos incident wasn't about food at all. It was about a finger positioning. Get your minds out of the gutter. He explained that the AI detected the student's finger positioning, and I quote, "a couple fingers in, a couple fingers out of his pocket." In other words, the problem wasn't the system, the problem was how the kid held his hand. If a system's intended behavior leads to police pointing guns at children over snacks and finger angles, that system isn't broken. It's dangerous by design. The most damning evidence came from Nashville, Tennessee. In January at Antioch High School, a student opened fire in a cafeteria, killing one student and injuring others. OmniAlert's system was active, and it never detected the gun. Officials later said the shooter's position prevented activation. That explanation only deepens the problem. If a system misses an actual shooting, but repeatedly flags snacks, gestures, and everyday objects, what is it actually for? The answer isn't prevention, it's reassurance. In November, OmniAlert released a glossy document titled School Shootings 2024. It read like a public health report: compassionate language, carefully curated statistics, and a long list of solutions: mental health, training, threat assessment, police presence, and of course, AI cameras. What was missing was the one thing that would eliminate the need for all of it: gun access. That omission wasn't accidental, it was strategic. Because if guns were actually regulated, OmniAlert wouldn't have a market. This is the core conflict of interest in school safety tech. The problem must continue for the product to exist. Surveillance doesn't stop with cameras. Platforms like Gaggle monitor student emails, documents, and chats for keywords associated with harm or violence. In Tennessee, a 13-year-old girl made a crude joke in a private chat. Gaggle flagged it. By the end of the day, she had been arrested, strip searched, jailed overnight, then placed on house arrest. Afterward, the company said the system wasn't used as intended. But systems that cannot understand context will always escalate. And when they do, the consequences land on kids, not companies. When AI cameras weren't enough, panic buttons entered the picture. Centrigix sells wearable lanyards teachers must tap multiple times, up to 8, to trigger a lockdown, in chaos, under stress, while children are running. And Centrigix isn't just selling devices. They're lobbying for laws like Alyssa's Law that mandate their products statewide, guaranteeing a captive market. Legislation replaces accountability. If it's required by law, failure becomes compliance. Then came drones. The most prominent of these systems came from Campus Guardian Angel, a Texas startup promising drone-based school shooter response systems. Their sales pitch was cinematic. Launched in seconds, reach a shooter in 15, neutralize the threat in under a minute by using pepperball rounds, sirens, and strobe lights. And when all else fails, high-speed collisions. They framed it as buying critical time. They framed it as innovation. They framed it as inevitable. But buried inside the pitch was a detail that should have stopped everyone cold. The company's founders proudly explained that the idea for Campus Guardian Angel came to them while sitting in a Whataburger. Not during years of research, not after studying school shooting failures, not alongside educators, counselors, or trauma experts, but over fast food. This wasn't presented as a warning sign. It was presented as a charming origin story. And that alone tells you how unserious this entire conversation has become. Because there is something deeply wrong with the world when the response to mass school shootings is conceived casually, then rushed into live environments filled with children and funded with public money, without rigorous evidence, accountability, or real-world testing. Florida approved taxpayer funding. Texas parents were encouraged to fundraise. Arkansas officials applauded demonstrations. The demos looked perfect. The targets didn't move, no one screamed, nothing went wrong. But real school shootings are chaos. Real students don't stand still, and real mistakes have consequences. As a line from one of my favorite movies says, bricks don't hit back. When asked what happens if the system is wrong, if a drone misidentifies a student, if a drone hits the wrong person, if it escalates instead of stabilizing, the answers were always vague. Because once again, responsibility was nowhere to be found. This wasn't about stopping violence. It was about looking decisive. It was about spectacle. And the fact that a company selling weaponized drones for schools traces its origins to a fast food brainstorming session should unsettle anyone pretending this is about safety. When technology still wasn't enough to project control, lawmakers reached for something older and far more dangerous: more guns. In Texas, that took the form of the School Marshal Program, a policy that allows school employees to carry firearms on campus even though they are not police officers. The requirements sound serious at first glance. A volunteer must already have a license to carry. They must pass a psychological exam. They must complete about 80 hours of training approved by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. 80 hours. That's roughly 2 work weeks. For context, police officers received hundreds to thousands of hours of academy training, followed by field training, ongoing certification, and supervision. Even with all that, officers still miss shots, misidentify threats, freeze under pressure, or fire on the wrong person. Or in the case of Uvalde, stand out in the hallway for a couple of hours. But under this program, a teacher, coach, or administrator can carry a gun around children after a short course, a background check, and paperwork, all without a badge, without the same accountability standards and without the infrastructure of policing. Supporters call this a layered security approach. What it really is a liability transfer. If something goes wrong, it won't be the state's fault. It won't be the legislature's fault. It won't be the gun lobby's fault. It will be the fault of the individual employee who is put in an impossible position and told to act like law enforcement without being law enforcement. And this isn't theoretical. Across the country, armed school staff programs have already produced guns being left unattended in bathrooms, accidental discharges in classrooms, students accessing unsecured weapons, and near-miss shootings during drills and confusion. These aren't rare anomalies either. They are predictable outcomes when you flood schools with firearms and call it safety. The most telling detail is this. Texas lawmakers will not restrict who can buy guns, how many guns can be owned, or how they must be stored. They are perfectly comfortable putting more guns into schools, carried by civilians, and hoping nothing goes wrong. As I am fond of saying, trying to fight guns with more guns is like trying to cure cancer with more cancer. By December, the consequences of all this were no longer abstract. At Lawton Childs Middle School in Florida, an automated weapons detection system triggered a code red lockdown in the middle of the school day. The reason? A student was walking down the hall holding a clarinet, not threatening anyone, not acting erratically, not attempting to scare classmates, just holding a musical instrument in a way the system didn't like. The software flagged the student's posture as a potential firearm. Alarms went off, doors locked, police were called. Students hid in classrooms. Parents received the text message every family dreads. All because an algorithm decided that a band kid looked like a shooter. The incident resolved without injuries, but that's not the point. The point is how easily it couldn't have. When police respond to a weapons call, they are trained to expect lethal danger. Add adrenaline, limited information, and automated alerts that carry the authority of the system, and the margin for error collapses. What followed was more revealing. The official takeaway wasn't that the technology was unreliable. It wasn't that automated detection lacks context. It was that this kind of escalation puts students at risk. Instead, parents were told to remind their children not to pretend to hold weapons at school. The responsibility shifted again. Not to the vendor, not to the school district, not to the system that confused a clarinet with a rifle, but to the students. By this point in 2025, this logic had become familiar. A snack bag triggers police, finger placement becomes probable cause, a clarinet shuts down a school. Each incident is treated as an isolated mistake. Each response is framed as caution. Each failure lowers the threshold for the next one. At some point, school safety stopped being about protecting children from violence. It became about protecting systems from scrutiny, by redefining ordinary behavior as risk and calling the resulting chaos working as intended. And when that's the standard, anything can be a threat. 2025 taught us something important. Failure doesn't end systems anymore. It just trains them. False positives aren't stopping adoption. They're becoming acceptable collateral. And every incident lowers the bar for the next one. 2025 wasn't the year school safety failed. It was the year failure became acceptable. Companies sold certainty that they couldn't deliver. Officials defended systems that caused harm. Oversight bodies reframed danger as procedure. And accountability never showed up. Because accountability threatens business models. It threatens political comfort. It threatens the illusion that we're doing something. Until someone is held responsible, vendors, policymakers, and institutions, this cycle will continue. Not because it has to, but because it's profitable. For anyone who wants more background, including stories that can't be told on YouTube, I maintain a website at realcrime.net where I've been writing about crime for over 25 years. My most recent posts have been about the Brown University shooting. If you want to help support this work, you can do so at patreon.com/Trench Reynolds. Every bit matters. My thanks to Mare, Kelly, and Trish, and to everyone on the free tier. I appreciate the interest more than I could probably say. Please like, comment, subscribe, and do that new hype thing. Again, whatever that is. Like I said, I only use the desktop version of YouTube. Until next time, remember to keep your clarinets pointed at the ground. And I'm Trench Reynolds, and I write crime.